What's up guys, Matt with BAAM Ranch. So today, let's talk about homestead properties. Picking a property, how to choose what you're looking for. There's 1,000 different ways to go with this. I can give you my opinions. Before we do that, let me give you some background. If you don't want to watch that, I'll put some timestamps below to the actual meat and potatoes of the video. So what prompted this video is we are currently looking to move. And I've lived on the second story apartments. I've lived in houses. I've lived in a place that had 6 acres. I grew up on a ranch where we had hundreds of acres, right? And so that's where I'm coming from. I've got a little bit of experience. I say that to establish a little bit of credibility on why I deserve to have an opinion on the subject, okay? Why do we need a homestead? I think homesteading in a preparedness-based mindset. So preparedness-based homesteading. So I want a place where I can produce some of my own food. I can grow independence each day. I can actively build something that my whole family enjoys and have that separation from, you've heard me say, don't be where the problem's at. Have that separation outside of the city limits, so we're living in the country, so we're somewhat isolated from any problems that may happen. Some people are real big about, using a homestead to make a living. You buy a big enough property and now you want to buy cattle and, or you want to breed horses or, grow row crops. All of those are perfectly good reasons to have a homestead. But this video, I'm going to focus on, us normal folks, the ones that actually have a job that we have to go to. And we can't, dump out the money or go into debt to buy, thousands of acres to raise row crops or to run livestock, to have that be the primary business that produces income to support our family. Although there's no reason you can't use something to augment your income as well. So I guess the first thing we got to talk about is location, because everything can be perfect, but if it's in a shitty spot, nothing's ever really going to work out, right? For example, location within the area that you live in is important, but also on the broader things. Like if you want to try to grow oranges, you're probably not going to do that in Vancouver. And on the same token, we're not going to grow 1,000 bushels of corn when we're in the middle of Death Valley. So take a look at, the type of climate that you want. Most of us already live kind of in the area that we want to. So let's focus there. For me, my opinion is I want to be within the ice cream test distance from a city that's big enough to support a shopping mall, right? I want to be a reasonable drive from a shopping mall, no more than 45 minutes. I want to run into town, head to the grocery store, buy ice cream, and not worry whether or not that ice cream is going to make it back home. That separates me far enough from the major population that I've substantially reduced my vulnerabilities due to population density, but the convenience is still there, right? We could move out to West Texas in the middle of nowhere and we'd be in the middle of nowhere. We wouldn't have any of the conveniences. I still want to go into town with my wife and have a drink and make it back home at a decent hour. I don't want to stay up all night because I took my kids to the 9 o'clock movie, right? So there's a little bit of give and take that has to happen there. So for me, that urban, rural fringe area that's just a few miles separated from town where you can't actually see it necessarily, right? You don't hear the traffic and it's a secluded area, but 6, 8, 10 miles from town, that seems to hit the spot, at least for me anyway. Another thing that people tend to forget about location is it's pretty easy to find a piece of property there. You can buy that land and be the only one out there. The next thing you know, all of the other parcels around you come up for sale and you've got 40,000 neighbors and you're back to where it was. You feel like you're living in the city again, even though you're outside of city limits. So what we're kind of looking for is we want a house that's already established with already established neighbors that are on, 5, 10 acre plots, somewhere around there. But they're not very likely to subdivide the area that they live in. If you could find something that butts up against a national park, that area is not going to be developed. If there's a windmill farm across the highway from where you are, people are probably not going to build a house there. So you need to look at what is your potential to get new neighbors that you may or may not approve of. So we figured out the location. Let's talk about the land itself. The ultimate goal with this land is we need to get enough benefit from it to justify the cost of the property taxes and the extra expense and fuel it takes to get into town and drive to work. I've got a normal in-town, in-the-city job, just like most of you do as well. So I'm going to have to commute every day. So we need to have enough benefit from the land that we purchase to be able to offset those costs, or at least make it a justifiable expense. We've already discussed, we don't want to be where the problem is. And that's kind of a big factor. We normally talk about that, whenever we're talking about civil unrest. But there are considerations. Is it really close to a railroad track? Is there a lake there or a creek or something that may flood twice a year and now you've got 8 inches of water standing in your house? These are considerations. Where are the problem areas that exist around that land? There's plenty of resources online where you can look at, flood areas and other things, natural and man-made, that may potentially cause problems in the future. I probably wouldn't want to live 600 yards from a nuclear power plant. That's just one example. Don't be where the problem is. That's a potential problem that we're going to have to avoid. One thing that gets really overlooked is the actual physical shape of the property line. You can find a ton of property out there. It's very, very sizable acreage for sale, and it's super cheap. And then you look at it, and these long spaghetti properties, right? Or they're shaped in some sort of a weird semicircle crescent shape, or something about that property makes the shape of it unusable. It's a huge parcel of land, but only a small amount of it is available most of the year because there's a dry lake that is going to flood or at least fill up. And so you're not going to be able to put much or rely on that particular piece of land being useful to you in the future. So you need to keep that in consideration. What is the shape of the property and what are the obstructions that you cannot work around that exist in that? If you've got property on both sides of the Grand Canyon, it can show a whole lot of acreage that you actually own, but you've only got 20 foot on either side to deal with. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Then we need to start looking at what is the usefulness, because we're not just moving into a homestead, building a homestead as a place to live, but we're using it as a tool to help us live. We're going to grow our own food there. We're going to keep some food on the hoof. We're going to have chickens. These are all the things that people like us want, right? So how is the land going to be useful to you so you can get some payback from the purchase? Is the ground absolute crap, that's not going to grow anything? Has it been eradicated by chemicals and it's just bare dirt? Is it solid rock? Is it steep enough that you're not going to be able to grow anything? You'll have like a little postage stamp house, just like you're living in the city, and then everything else is just this sheer face. So is the land itself actually useful? And then we start looking at infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I mean, what are the utilities like? If you're on a septic and a well, those are your two utilities, right? What does the well look like? Is it capable of producing reliable water? A well inspection will answer that for the most part. Septic. Septic is a wonderful thing and a terrible thing. A septic system that's sized appropriately and functions and is up to date is wonderful, right? If you're on city sewer or county sewer or city water, county water, etc., you don't have any control over what happens with those. Having your own well, you have 100% control of. You're also 100% responsible for keeping that thing up and running. If you live in a really, really flat area, chances are it's just a couple days in a flooding type situation or a power out situation where the transfer pumps don't work for the sewage system, and that stuff starts backing up in your house. If you have a septic system, it doesn't matter. As long as your house doesn't get blasted off the face of the earth by a nuclear bomb or something like that, you can flush your toilets all day long. And if it starts to flood, you go and just get you a little pump, put it in the liquid side of the tank, and pump that stuff on out the way, right? So there are give and takes and pros and cons to each. You just need to decide what works best for you. On the subject of infrastructure, those are the utility-based things, you know, your water, electricity, sanitation, sewer. Does it have natural gas? It's something to consider. I think it's preferable, I would prefer it if it had natural gas, but it's not a deal breaker if it doesn't have it, at least not for me. What about internet availability? There's a lot of places that we have looked at. Like I said, we're in the process of looking for a new place, right? Where internet availability is pretty questionable. And my wife works from home. It's pretty hard for her to make a living working from home if she doesn't have internet connectivity. And what about the actual on-site physical structures? What do you want? Do you want outbuildings? Do you want fencing? Do you want solid concrete driveways? Is a gravel driveway good for you? Are you just fine with, you know, just a regular old topsoil driveway, just a place where the grass doesn't grow? Perimeter fencing, what is the importance of that? Those may not be major contributing factors on the purchase, but it is something that needs to be taken into consideration. You can easily spend well over $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 to put in a shop building. And for a homesteader, the shop is really pretty important. Having a place that's at least covered, that you can go in and work, a dry spot. Man, you don't realize the importance of a shop till you lived without one. I grew up, you know, living on a ranch, had a huge shop. The first house I bought had a shop. I got rid of that house and I missed it so much. We moved into a couple other rent houses, had garages. They weren't shops, but they were better than the dirt. So you don't need to underestimate the importance of a shop. Does it come with it, and how much does it cost to be able to put that infrastructure in? That kind of gets us on down to size, right? What size of property should you be looking at for your homestead? So the best I can do is what I think the average person would want. And we want to have it big enough that we can expand our capabilities in the future and not run out of space, but not so big that we're just getting eaten alive with maintenance and property taxes and things of that nature. So for me, that comes somewhere in the minimum of about the 1 acre range. And then that extends on up to maybe 10 acres. You could probably go a little bit more, 20 acres maybe. But you're gonna have to have, once you get over over the size of 10 acres, you really do need a tractor to maintain that. And man, you get over 20 acres and you almost have to be running a cattle operation. You have to be running some sort of business off of that to be able to recoup the cost of maintenance, property taxes, and everything else. Looking out for fire danger. You're just getting into something that's a lot more full-time than what most people are willing to commit to. If that's something that you're interested in, rock on, buddy. Go right for it. We're looking for something, a minimum of 1 acre, a maximum of 10. We want plenty of room to expand. 10 acres starts to get difficult to maintain without some sort of a tractor. 1 acre on the small end, it can get pretty cramped. You put a house, a shop, a driveway, a yard, a chicken run, a garden. 1 acre, you can be surprised how fast you can run out of room on 1 acre. 1 acre is the playing size of a football field. It's not near as big as what most people think. So 5 acres would be about perfect. After 5 acres in most states, you can qualify for an ag exemption on your taxes, get a pretty good tax break. Get anything from that and on up to 10 acres is something that the average person can maintain pretty easily. But with that being said, anything within that range is probably pretty good. Now, whenever you consider your acreage, right? So you look, this has 8.5 acres or 10 acres, 12 acres, 1 acre. The zone 1, if we're talking about the permaculture type philosophy of this, but your zone 1 will, have the stuff that is the most meaningful to you, right? This is where your garden is. This is where your chickens are. This is the place that you leave your back door and can go visit on a daily basis without having to jump on a four-wheeler to get there, right? So your zone 1 is going to take up a lot less space than you would actually imagine. Most people's zone 1, regardless of the size of their property, is in 3/4 to an acre and a half. And then the other stuff is, room to graze sheep, or, to rotate chickens throughout. Maybe you tractor your chickens and you want to have all that rotated out. It's places for equipment. Maybe you want to, build a shooting range. All of that extra stuff will still get used, but not nearly like the stuff you're going to use on a daily basis, which would qualify as your zone 1. So keep the zone 1 in mind when looking for a piece of property. Can you turn this into an effective zone 1? So I guess after all of those things have been considered, we run into stuff like cosmetics. Does the whole thing need remodeled? Is the carpet 17 years old? Is the siding covered with hail damage? Does the roof need replaced? All of these other things, which can absolutely be deal breakers, but it's something that you have to consider along with all of these other things. Remember, we don't live outdoors. The place we actually live is inside the home. So you really need to consider that. What everybody thinks is perfect is different. Can y'all hear my dog scratching at the door? Sorry, there's nothing I can do about it. But what everybody falls in love with is different, right? Men, hey, we need a tent, a little bit of land, a few chickens, and some place to keep our beer cold, and we're happy, right? Most of us, that's pretty much the way it is. But not everybody's like that, and you have to take that into consideration, right? Is the actual home, all this time we've been talking about the land, the home, is it livable? Is it something you're going to be able to heat when the power goes out? Is it something you're going to be able to cool when the power goes out? Is it a sound, solid structure? If you're in around Oklahoma City, tornado shelter, probably a good idea. That's a pretty livable aspect of a home, right? Even the place where I'm at, we get several tornadoes, within a 10-minute drive every year. So that's something that's a really big consideration for us. Does it have a tornado shelter that isn't so bad that my daughter's going to freak out about, screw it, the tornado can get me. I'm not going in there with the snakes and spiders. Take that into consideration. We go back to the other things. We're like, do you or your wife or husband or whatever want to be close to family? What about the particular politics? The politics of this county that I live in are okay. We're pretty happy with it. You go one county to the south, there's a small college there. It's a completely different ballgame. One county to the north, they don't care what you do, man. Just y'all do whatever y'all want. Y'all just keep it where we can't see it, right? So even within just a few miles of different locations, you can run into drastically different political environments, right? The county to the east of us, the entire county has a population of, I don't know, 30,000 across the entire county. The county I'm in has a population of approaching 500,000, and the main city is split right down the center by another county line. So the other half of the city is in that other county. So keep that in mind as well. And then weather. Weather is an important thing. If you hate the snow, probably Alaska, as cool as it sounds, isn't the place you need to be, right? If the heat absolutely sucks and you love going to the beach, The Arizona Strip, you know, that little strip of Arizona north of the Grand Canyon that is only accessible by going through another state and coming down through Utah, probably not where you want to be, right? So do me a favor, just put all of these things in a box and consider all of them. And I hope this helps, and I hope you got some type of value from it. Hey, and keep us in your prayers, man. We've really been looking hard for a house that we can build a homestead that we love to live at. The place we're at now was exactly what we needed. It was exactly where God wanted us when we moved in here. There's been a lot of restrictions coming up. There's been changes going on in this particular area. We're, 10, 12 miles from town, but we're in a developed area in the country, but doesn't, with neighbors, right? So God is telling us that it's time to move on, and it's just time. It's been a struggle to find what we're looking for. So do me a favor and y'all say a prayer for us on that, all right? Until next time, you be safe.